about Jane. Jane is an associate professor in interdisciplinary arts and sciences at UW-Tacoma. She's a trained facilitator in mindfulness-based stress reduction. And she's also created the CARE program, CARE standing for Compassion, Awareness, Responding, and Enjoyment. And she provides these trainings all across UW. She's piloted them with many different groups, and they're making a really great difference in our community. So thank you, Jane. Jane has her PhD in comparative religion, 2 master's degrees, philosophy and religion in the contemporary world, and a BA in English literature. Jane, again, thanks so much for being here with us, and I don't want to take up too much more time, so I'm just going to pass it off to you.
Thank you, and hello everybody. Good to see you. How's the sound? Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. If at any point any of that gets funky or you can't see something on the screen, don't be shy about just writing in chat or yelling out. I can only see a few faces at a time on the screen, so let me know if it doesn't work. So I figured maybe we're all in the middle of a busy Friday and we probably all had a busy week. So maybe we could start with a little grounding meditation settling practice, which I will guide us through. Obviously, this is entirely optional. If you would rather not participate, just take this moment to sit quietly and enjoy a bit of peace. This practice will take about 5 minutes, and it's called Stability, Spaciousness and Warmth. And I like this one because it just helps me, at least, and I hope for you too, to kind of settle in, calm down, drop some of the scripts that seem really urgent, and find a little bit of serenity, I hope. So if you're willing, I'll start and then I'll guide us through, and it'll take about 5 minutes. So if you're comfortable, that's great. Stay comfortable. If you're sort of not, get yourself into a comfortable posture. It's fine to lie down, actually, if you prefer to do that. And closing your eyes if that's comfortable for you. And just letting the quietness settle into you. Taking 3 conscious breaths. So by that I mean noticing, feeling the air entering your body. Maybe you feel your belly or your lungs expanding, and then letting it go. Feeling the contraction of your abdomen and chest as you breathe out. If you are feeling particularly stressed today, then a neat little brain hack to help calm you down is to let your out breath be 1 or 2 counts longer than your in breath. So if you count into a count of 3 and then breathe out to a count of 4. And what we know is that activates the vagus nerve, which is one of the nerves that helps us to get into rest and digest mode and help boot us out of the fight or flight mode. So that's kind of a cool little hack to know about whenever you're feeling a little bit stressed. And now just drawing attention to how your body is supported by the chair or the ground or whatever it is that you are sitting or lying on. And tuning into a sense of stability. Noticing that you are held and supported by the earth. If you like to visualize, if you're a visual person, you could also imagine something that represents for you great stability. So it could be a mountain or a deeply rooted tree. And as you conjure up these images of stability, focus on the physical sensations of your body that correlate with that sense of stability. And then allowing your attention in your mind's eye to come back to the breath. And as you breathe in, becoming aware of a sense of spaciousness. So you're breathing in and your lungs are expanding. And when you breathe out, your out breath is dissolving into this great spaciousness around you. You might become aware consciously of the room around, outside your screen. Behind you, to the sides of you, above and below. And allowing your imagination to go as far as it likes with this. So becoming aware that there's a great spaciousness beyond your room, the walls that you're within. You could even recognize that we are in this, with this tiny little planet in this vast universe. Or you might imagine yourself on the edge of a vast ocean, or on the top of a mountain where the view goes on and on to the horizon, or looking up at the starry sky at night. Just bringing to mind any sense of spaciousness and noticing how that feels in your body. And then dropping that imagery and that focus and bringing your attention to any sense of warmth, physical warmth that you might be experiencing. And if you're having a hard time with that, you could cradle one hand in the other, or you could put your hand on your chest or your hand on your cheek and just tune in to sensations of warmth. And allow that warmth to just spread, pervade your experience as much as you're able. You might imagine easing into a lovely warm hot tub or lying in the sun, allowing yourself to kind of melt and relax in the warmth. And then just reconnecting your attention to your body sitting here. Tuning in again with your breathing. And if your eyes are closed, you might want to open them and just reorient to the room around you. And you might check back in with the screen, but also recognizing that even though we're like pixels on the screen, all of us, there's also other living, breathing bodies, people out there who are all sharing this experience together today. Okay, so I just want to give 1 or 2 minutes if there's any check-in people want to do. How did that feel? Any questions about that practice? Go ahead and just take yourself off mute, or feel free to write in chat. Just make sure everyone's okay. If I hear nothing, I will carry on. Oh, Anna, your heart rate went down. Good. That's great. That's a good sign. Yeah. Okay. Everybody good? Okay. Very calming. I'm glad you feel calm. Beth, good. Yeah, it's really nice to leave on the lie on the floor. That's true. That is a great benefit from working from home. And yeah, the breathing in and out thing is kind of useful, and it works pretty well. I've used it sometimes when I'm having trouble sleeping. It's a good thing to do as well. And you can just do it for a few cycles and it has an effect. So that's great. So I'm going to move on. Before I share with you the kind of presentation, we're going to do a little bit in the presentation. We're going to learn a little bit about self-compassion and how this idea of common humanity connects with self-compassion. And we'll be checking in with each other about our experiences with that. And then we will do another practice to help generate this feeling of common humanity. So I'm going to try and give you a little bit of theory and a little bit of practice. We're going to do head, hand, and heart. So head is like the cognitive part, so to help you understand why we do this. The heart is the kind of meditative stuff to help cultivate those emotions. And the hand is practical things you can do in the moment, when you're at work. So Nan, thank you. I'm glad you like my background. It's making me feel pretty chilled out too. My bedroom was looking like too messy for public observation. And the cat was being very active. Okay, so I'm going to try and share my screen and show you, before I start the presentation, a little clip. And I want to see, my question to you is, does this resonate with you? Of course, first of all, I have to figure out how to make this work. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm in the right lines. Right, let me make sure that you can hear the video. Share sound, maximize it. Anna, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see that okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Great, thanks. And if the sound isn't working, can you let me know? Okay. I'm just going to look at this for just over a minute.
Hi, Kaz. Hi, Shelley. As you know, we are producing a course called The Power of Self-Compassion. So we're just talking to people today about how they treat themselves. Do you have a critical voice? And if so, what do you find it saying to you?
I definitely have a critical voice. I think everybody does. And I think they all start from when you're a kid. So, I think all the things that my parents said, I hear, but it's normally about not doing a good job.
It's constantly stopping me as I try to complete thoughts or try to make steps forward.
It's a voice that always tells me that I'm not enough, or that I need to do better, or that there's something about me that I have to change.
When you fail or make a mistake, what types of things run through your mind?
I'm not worthy. Everybody's going to see my mistake. Nobody else makes mistakes like I do.
You're stupid. I can't believe you forgot something easy. This was basic. Why are you having so much trouble doing something so simple?
People don't want me around, that I'm uninteresting, boring, and or just too weird for people's company.
It says that I should have done better, and sometimes it says mean words about myself.
It's probably the loudest thing that's usually coming through my head before anything else, is at least ringing that failure over and over again.
And let me give you a scenario where a friend of yours comes to you, has made a mistake, and what would you say to that friend?
Well, the first thing I would tell them that it's okay. You don't need to feel all the weight of this.
Most likely you're holding on to this more tightly than anybody else.
This in no way, reflects your character or reflects your ability to do something. Definitely a lot kinder to my friends than I am to myself.
Okay.
How do you think you would change if you used that same voice that you use?
Okay. So my question to you all is, you can write in chat or just call out or raise your hand in the emoji thing. Can you relate to that self-critical voice, the prevalence of that self-critical voice? Yeah, I see 100% someone, yes. Yeah. Absolutely resonates with me. Yeah. Thank you. Especially being kinder to friends than myself. Yeah, right. Exactly. So I guess if there's anything reassuring about this, well, the bad news is that this critical voice is pretty prevalent and it's kind of toxic. And yeah, Megan, you said you think it's even worse in isolation and quarantine. I totally agree with that. I find that too. And I think that when we look at the sort of theory about what's going on with this, there's good reason why that might be the case. So it's pretty prevalent. Jennifer said, Danny, I'll get you called to the itty bitty shitty committee because there can be more than one voice in it. Yeah, absolutely. I really like that. Yeah, for sure. And they can compound each other. Yeah. So this training in self-compassion is really trying to address this situation, to acknowledge that voice, but to maybe take away some of its power. But the first thing to recognize is that it's really, really common. In fact, I think we all have it. Apparently, it's more common, strangely, in Western cultures. And we might come up with theories about this, about kind of competitive culture. And yeah, that we feel ashamed to make mistakes. It's common, it's something we all share together, but we often don't feel that way. We feel that it's something that is unique to us. And that's one of the feelings, the compounding factors, this sense of isolation that we'll be focusing on today to see how the techniques that we can use to respond to that. So thanks for your comments. I'm going to try and share again, and this time it will be hopefully the PowerPoint. And let's make it. Okay, so common humanity. So what we're going to do today is we've just acknowledged that many of us have a self-compassion deficit. We're going to look at the 3 steps of self-compassion, and this step we're talking about is step number 2. We're going to hear from an expert briefly, Kristen Neff, who is kind of one of the big names for self-compassion. I think Anna mentioned her last time. Then we'll have a little explore about some barriers to self-compassion, and that will be quite interactive, I hope. And then we will do a self-compassion exercise. As I said before, do jump in or stop if you have questions or need clarification. So this is Kristen Neff's work. She's a psychologist at University of Texas in Austin. So when we met with Danny in the first session in January, we focused on mindful awareness. So the first step of self-compassion is recognizing that the pain is there, or that the difficulty is there. So, for example, what we often do when we're in pain or suffering is we kind of rush on to the next thing, so we try not to deal with it, that it just really kicks the can down the road. Or maybe we completely overreact and get kind of paralyzed by it. So mindfulness brings this sense of balance that enables us to look with kind of honest eyes at that experience. And what we are doing when we practice mindfulness is kind of building the capacity to sit in that seat and watch with honest eyes, rather than becoming too reactive or in denial. So when we did the practice at the beginning of this session, the stability practice, if you like, mindfulness is the kind of stability part, finding a foundation from which to notice there is pain, that you're suffering. So it's first step. Common humanity is, I think, is so interesting, that one of the key issues with that makes our pain so difficult, it's not just the pain itself, but it's the fact that we feel so isolated a lot of the time, that we feel like the only person having this pain. And that's kind of the nature of the beast. It kind of comes with the whole package of pain and suffering. And it kind of brings our focus in on ourselves. So one way to counteract that is to focus on the fact that actually this pain is part of the human condition, that you're not the only person who experiences it, and that there are countless other people who have and will experience this too. And even having that thought takes your attention away from your own pain and contextualizes it in the sense of, in the context of other humans. And this research shows that just that step itself, that kind of seeking for the connection with others, is a powerful antidote to that sense of isolation, and kind of helps us feel less personally attacked or constricted by whatever it is that's troubling us. And the final step is kind of doing something about it. So recognizing that there's pain, recognizing that we're not alone in experiencing this pain, and then treating that pain kindly in the same way you might treat the pain of a friend. So what this would look like in terms of, like, if you were saying a phrase to yourself when you're experiencing something painful, you just say, this hurts. So acknowledge that it exists. I have an example of this, that maybe this will help you to illustrate this. The other day I was talking to a friend, and I'm English, and one of the ways that we kind of weird, our love languages, I suppose, are kind of teasing each other. And so, I was being teased by my friend, but that particular day I was feeling just really sensitive. I might even say hypersensitive. And I felt that the teasing kind of hit a nerve, and I felt like, ouch. It just felt, eek. And then I felt really mad at myself, like, oh, how ridiculous. She's only teasing. Don't be such a lightweight. How can you be so, oversensitive? And that just made it even worse, because like, oh, I'm such a loser. I'm so oversensitive. Mindful awareness would say, okay, whether or not you like it, that hurt. End of the story. There's pain there and it needs addressing. Does that make sense? Hope so. So it's just recognizing what's there, even if you don't want to recognize it. I'm seeing a chat flapping up. Oops. Okay, yes, thank you. Common humanity would be like saying a phrase like, everybody goes through this, or everybody goes through something like this. And non-judgmental self-kindness would be some kind of encountering your own suffering with supportive friendship and a sense of understanding, not punishment. So in my example, it would be, okay, so, sometimes you just feel really sensitive, and things get to you that normally they wouldn't. And, maybe you're just feeling really tired today. that's the understanding response rather than, oh, I can't believe you're being so hypersensitive, what's wrong with you? So it's the way that we talk to each other is manifested in the non-judgmental self-kindness. Okay. Now I want to show you Kristin Neff talking about self-compassion, the number 2, the common humanity. Let me see if I can do it this way.
Humanity, really framing one's own experience in light of the common human experience. It's very funny if I were to ask any of you, are a human being? Are you a human being? Yes, of course. Is everyone else a human being? Yes, of course. Does everyone else suffer? Yes, of course. You would say that logically. But in the moment, when you just blew it at work, or you had someone reject you, or something really bad happens in your life, what happens non-rationally is that we get very egocentric. We feel like, why me? This somehow has happened to me. I'm the only one who's messed up. I'm the only one who's going through that difficult time. And we feel really cut off from others. It's as if somehow when things go wrong, that's abnormal. This is not supposed to be this way. Something has gone wrong. But is that the case? Has anything gone wrong? Is anything abnormal? No. That's what life is. Life goes wrong. No one in here signed a contract before you got, born in this world saying, I would be perfect, my life would be perfect, and yet it's like, this is not the plan I signed up for. I'm pissed off about it, right? That's how we react. The problem with that, and there's a lot of problems with that, but one of the main things is when we feel isolated and cut off from others, physiologically, that's very frightening. If you think evolutionarily, one of the worst things that can happen to us is to be isolated from the group, because then we aren't safe. And it's interesting, this aspect of well-being, I don't think has been studied enough. This sense of, can we feel connected to others in our suffering, or do we feel isolated from others in our suffering? And I can tell you in the workshops I've conducted, especially the 8-week ones, at the end I asked people what they got out of this the most. Almost every single person says common humanity. I realize it's not just me. It's not just me who judges myself. It's not just me who suffers like this. Very important to remember that this is the human experience. This is how things are supposed to be. Okay, nothing has gone wrong. Yes, it's painful, but it's normal. It's natural. And then this is where the mindfulness comes in.
So I hope that helped to clarify a little bit that it's, a crucial part of what makes the pain so difficult. And it's so common. I'm just checking on the chat here. Yes, we will be sharing the slides, exactly, yeah. So just a little bit of kind of neurobiology, very briefly, which I find is kind of helpful to give a little bit of background and see what's going on in my brain and body when this stuff is happening. So we basically have 3 emotional regulation systems in our bodies, in our systems, in our brains and bodies. One is a incentive and resource seeking system. So in the kind of hunter-gatherer days, that would be the one that would help us go out and build shelter and hunt and do all those kind of things. Now it's the one that makes us go out and earn $1 and get the next new car, etc., etc. That one, it has hormones like dopamine. So when or neurotransmitters, it's like you feel happy when you've achieved something. This one is more connected with self-esteem. So self-esteem is different from self-compassion because self-esteem is contingent upon you meeting some criteria that make you good enough. And that can be tricky because that criteria can often keep being, pushed over the next horizon. Then there's a threat and self-protection system. And this one is kind of the most basic, and it's what tries to keep us safe. So we're constantly scanning for threats. And this is what makes us run from, saber-toothed tigers and things. And nowadays, whatever dangers we might perceive around us. When we're in this mode, we go into fight or flight mode. So cortisol and adrenaline, and it doesn't typically feel particularly pleasant. When we are self-critical, we are activating this threat mode, ironically, on ourselves. So when we start to be really self-judgmental, we are actually activating our own stress response to our own self-talk. So self-criticism is not really our friend when it comes to helping us function well, because what it does is it just kind of constricts us, makes us more self-focused. When you're in a threat and self-protection mode, when you're fight or flight mode, I don't know if you've noticed this, but you tend to find it much harder to like think straight. It's hard to keep a kind of broad horizon. You miss things, you lose your sense of context and perspective. So it's not a great mode to be in when you're really wanting to function well and fully. So a lot of us think that we have to beat ourselves up to push ourselves to do things, and we get that cultural message a lot. But actually self-criticism doesn't help very much with that. It doesn't make us more effective. It actually makes us shut down a little bit more. So then we come on to the hero system, the caring and soothing system. And this is the one that we use for kind of connecting with other people, caregiving, romance, those kind of things. And this is neurotransmitters like oxytocin, the feel-good cuddle chemical. And when we're in self-compassion mode, we're activating this mode of our system. So this is, when we're in this mode, we tend to be more expansive, more receptive rather than reactive. So when we're doing these exercises, we're trying to shift from the self-criticism mode into this self-compassion mode, and it's kind of creating more potential for connection and more potential for thriving. I'm just checking in the chat again. Does that make sense to people? Yeah, it opens up compassion, right, exactly. So one way around you can do this is this one, the threat and self-protection system, like I said, is very kind of self-concerned. When you kind of force your mind to look beyond your own horizon, so when you even notice or make the observation, other people experience this too, you're starting to make these connections of affiliation, and you're starting to create at least a potential for the caring and soothing system to come online. So you're kind of like, just by that cognitive looking around for, oh, is it true that others feel like this? You're creating a shift that is a virtuous cycle rather than a vicious cycle. I want to stop and just make sure there's time for some questions or comments at this point. We'll do some interacting a bit more in a moment. Any questions or anything that people are not clear about so far? Okay, so let's have a look at some barriers to self-compassion. And this is going to be a question for all of you. So, something for us to ponder. I'll put this up and then I'm going to take this screen share down, and I hope that you'll jump in or write your perspectives. Do you find generating compassion for yourself more difficult than generating it for others? Yes, a few yeses. Yes. Yes, much easier to be compassionate to others, definitely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Good. So it seems so far people who have responded have seemed pretty unanimous about that. So my next question, I guess, is anyone wish to speculate about why that might be? Why is generating self-compassion so difficult, and what barriers do you think you experience that maybe, for some people just get a bit icky about self-compassion? Like what is it? What's behind that for you? Socialization. What kind of socialization? We're socialized into finding it difficult, but what's the social message we're getting? It feels selfish, makes you feel weak. We're taught to be compassionate to others, not to ourselves, our cultural upbringing. Feel like I'm less deserving of compassion than others, that I should be stronger than that, or that I brought it on myself and I need to deal with the consequences of laziness or procrastination. Yeah, Stephanie, I can so relate to those messages. No one really cares about your feelings is the message, or I know too much about myself. Yeah, you see, I mean, when you pattern and learn from parents, yeah, mum putting dad's needs first, you are selfish if you think about yourself. I mean, if you sort of look at these and you think, and I think, I mean, I totally agree. I have all of these too. Also, suck it up. Look how brutal it looks, right? Think about if you were to write these things about somebody else, about a friend. You'd be like, no way. Oh, I want to hang out with someone who talks to me like that. So we are culturally conditioned to find it difficult and challenging. We don't have a good reason to be lacking that area that we're being hard on ourselves for. Oh, right, like I've got no excuse for this. And sometimes we don't realize that we're being self-critical. Yes, that's so true. In fact, one of the things that can happen when you start to tune in and you start to get the mindfulness part is that you can be kind of horrified by the self-talk that you're giving to yourself. So yeah, that's true. I'm going to put up now, thank you for the comments, and so interesting that so many of them had a similar, right? So it's clearly a kind of rich theme that we share. So let's look. This Kristen Neff did some research about barriers to self-compassion, and she called it fears of self-compassion. And here are some of the statements that were kind of popular amongst people who find it difficult. So one is that I fear if I become too compassionate to myself, I'll lose my self-criticism and my flaws will show. I feel that if I become kinder and less critical to myself, then my standards will drop. I've never felt compassion for myself, so I wouldn't know where to begin to develop these feelings. I feel that I don't deserve to be kind and forgiving to myself. And if I really think about it, about being kind and gentle to myself, it makes me feel sad. So let's address a couple of these before we go into a practice. The first one I want to bring up is this one. If I really think about being kind and gentle with myself, it makes me sad. I wonder if some of you may have experienced this already, like the moment you start attending to your own pain. Like I was like that the other day when I was feeling sensitive about my friend. I was like, oh, when I said to myself, oh, that really hurts, I just felt like bursting into tears. And I was like, oh, well, that's, then the self-critic was saying, oh God, don't be such a drama queen. But the compassion researcher in me was like, I'm acknowledging my own pain, and that's kind of a relief. And this is something that just needs to come out, right? If it was a friend, I would say, don't be silly. Of course, it's fine to express, if you feel sad, you feel sad. There's nothing wrong with that. You're human, right? So because we're so habituated not to be kind to ourselves, sometimes when we actually begin to do that, it's like opening the floodgates. So this is called, there's a lot of research about this. Kristen Neff and her colleague Chris Germer have written about this a lot. It's called the backdraft effect. So when you have a fire and if you were to open the door, then the fire roars up even worse because it's got oxygen. And the theory is with the backdraft effect is that if we've been kind of repressing our own or not listening to our own needs for a long time, and then we give the oxygen of compassion, it's got room to breathe and it sometimes feels bigger. So, if you experience that, a helpful thing to do is just to notice this is a common thing. It's called backdraft. It's actually kind of a good sign. It means that you're addressing something that needs to be addressed. If you find yourself getting really overwhelmed by it though, then, do this gently in stages. You don't have to you can back off and do something calming and relaxing and then come back to it another time. But know that that response is normal and common. Just making sure, looking at the chat again. Okay, here's a question. So my example about feeling hurt and thinking I'm oversensitive. How do you acknowledge that hurt and be okay with feeling that way if you've received a lifelong message around you that you're overly sensitive? Yeah, thank you, Minal. That's a great question. I think at this stage, at the initial stage of encountering your own suffering, you acknowledging that pain is there is quite countercultural, probably for you. It's a break in your own habits, right? When you allow your hurt to be heard, then sometimes you feel more, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe because it's something that you just happens when you practice it, but you allow yourself you feel a bit more secure in yourself, because the next time you having some pain like that, you're not, I'm talking about the interaction with yourself. You're not treading on eggshells waiting for the self-critic to come in. You're thinking, oh, it's okay. There's a bit of pain, but it's all right. I'll deal with it. I'll manage. And it's okay to feel pain. You start to be your own friend, your own coach. And then the messages that other people have been sending you, you don't have to internalize them. You're kind of reprogramming yourself. That's a kind of waffly way to say this, but I guess what I'm saying is that this is an act of reprogramming, and only we can really do it because it's the inner voice that's been, if you like, programmed. And we can reprogram our inner voice. But so the kind of positive thing here is that we have the power to do that. Even though there's might be a lot of kind of inertia built up from a lifetime of habit. Does that make sense? Hope so. Keep the questions coming. They're great. Thank you. Good. Also, there's a whole bunch of resources I can share with you all about these topics, which may address some of these things. Another thing to be aware of with this kind of idea that, well, if I'm not hard on myself, then I'll become complacent, etc., or I'm selfish. Well, one thing is that the research is pretty clear about this, and if you're interested in that, there's a bunch of stuff that Kristin Neff and her colleagues have come up with. People who practice self-compassion generally are happier, they're more optimistic, they're more grateful, and they have better relationships with others. So it actually tends to spill out into the way you interact with others in the world, and in a way that's positive. So if it's selfish, it's a very kind of positive, wise selfishness, because it positively impacts those around you as well. One of the big problems that many of us share is this thing called pathological perfectionism. So the idea that we have to do everything just right, and being so self-critical when we don't. Self-compassion is a very powerful antidote to pathological perfectionism, which in turn can lead to stress and anxiety and depression. So again, it's a powerful tool to help us feel less isolated, more supported, less stressed. And it also makes us more resilient. Setbacks bug us less. And I also discovered recently that with compassion generally, one of the questions people worry about is like boundaries. Like if you're compassionate to others, maybe they'll walk all over you. The research is showing that the opposite is the case, actually. People who are more compassionate and more self-compassionate tend to have better boundaries because they recognize that they are just as deserving of care and compassion as anybody else. And so it's kind of quite matter of fact. It's not personalized. It's like, well, I'm also a suffering being who deserves to be happy. So, you know, I will say no to that thing. And it kind of is liberating like that. So there's lots of myths. There's actually, Kristen Neff did a great video called The Myths of Self-Compassion, which I really highly recommend. She talks about these things much more eloquently, I'm sure, than I'm doing. It also doesn't mean that you're not accountable. So I love this quote from, she's a Buddhist teacher, Tara Brach. She said, feeling compassion for ourselves in no way releases us from responsibility for our actions. Rather, it releases us from the self-hatred that prevents us from responding to our lives with clarity and balance. So it actually helps us to get more honest eyes, because we know we won't get beaten up if we look and admit to what's going on. We can actually let it out into the air with kindness. We're more inclined to engage with those things or those sides of us that we might find challenging. And then the last thing I want to say before we get into practice is that it enables us to have balanced action. So this is, again, something that Kristen Neff and Chris Germer came up with. And they talk about the yin and yang. So the yin of compassion is the kind of inner being with ourselves. So comforting, soothing, and validating. And that is the kind of precondition for showing up in the world in a way that's more kind of authentic and kind. And it can help us to feel more motivated, more available for others, and also more, you know, we're able to protect our own boundaries and to be kind of our own values. So there are common myths about self-compassion, you know, things like it's selfish, it's self-centered, etc., etc. But actually the research just doesn't bear those out. So if you're interested in that, take a look. Okay, I want to stop the share and again give time for questions or comments.
There's a few more previous ones in the chat too.
Oh, okay.
One about cultures and one about gender and self-compassion.
Okay, thank you. Feel that we have good reason. Can you call one out that you see?
Yeah, of course. So the first one says, are there any cultures that are better about self-compassion than others?
Yes, thank you. I missed that one. Apparently, so you've probably all heard of the Dalai Lama, right? Who's a Tibetan Buddhist, head of Tibetan Buddhism, or a branch of Tibetan Buddhism. So obviously he's originally from Tibet and now he's in exile in India. And when he came to the West, he started to engage a lot with Western scientists and psychologists. And they would talk to him about, well, we know we've got this problem with like really low self-esteem or self-hatred. And he actually didn't even have a word in his vocabulary for it. And the translator had a really hard time to kind of explain it. And the Tibetans were just scratching their heads. Like, wait, what's that? So apparently in more, I mean, I don't want to generalize, I am generalizing a bit, but in more collectivistic cultures, which tend to be more in Asian countries, again, I'm generalizing, so don't quote me on all of this, but more collectivistic cultures tend to have less of the focus on self-esteem and then the kind of deficit of self-esteem, which is interesting. And theories are that this culture is, or the Western cultures are very kind of competitive and individualistic in a way that we internalize in our own narratives. Yeah.
Thanks, Jane. And then the second question is, do women struggle with self-compassion more than men?
I don't know the answer to that scientifically. Anecdotally, I would say it seems like it from the conversations I've had, but that is anecdotally. But then actually maybe it's hard to say, because I think in many cases for men it's they feel less culturally permitted to talk about those kind of questions and to say, oh, I'm beating myself up, because there would be kind of maybe have peer group pressure not to even say that. So it's kind of hard to tell. I can look that up, but it seems, I don't know, what do you think? What does anybody think?
Personally, I was thinking the same things you were thinking. As you would, I think naturally we think women would struggle with it more, but that men just socially and culturally sometimes aren't allowed to feel those feelings. So
right,
it's hard to say.
Yeah. Well, people, maybe women are more likely to kind of articulate. I do think that I think that happens in meetings in the workplace and things like that. I've noticed female colleagues will make many more self-deprecating or self-judgmental statements, or kind of qualifications about, I might be wrong about this, but I don't know whether that same is also happening in their heads of males, but they feel they're less culturally conditioned to express that. So yeah, that's a big question. Yeah. Good, there's another message. Cultural condition leads to women feeling that they should be doing more, and a perception of failing more. Yeah, and I do think also the expectations on a women from very early on are that, you should be serving or helping others, and that it's selfish to focus on your own needs. I think we get that a lot. So yeah. But this, I'm kind of hesitant to commit to any of these, because this is just like my personal perspective. I can dig out, see if there's some research about this, but it's certainly interesting things to think about. Okay, so are you ready to do a little bit of practice? Sound good? Okay, what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to send you something. We're going to do a kind of meditative thing right now, but I'm going to send to you through Anna an exercise which I think is really cool to do on your own. We'll share it up on the screen here maybe. And it's called the Self-Compassion Letter. Of course, I can't find it now. I'll just send it to Anna. But one way to do this is to think about writing yourself a letter. And instead of thinking about you as a recipient, you're imagining it a friend, you giving it to a friend. And apparently that exercise is very effective in boosting mood and lifting anxiety. And people who did this exercise for 6 days, once a day for 6 days, still had a mood lift from it 6 months later, even though they only did it for that 1 week. So I'll send that along to you. And I really encourage you to try that on your own. But right now we're going to do something that's kind of the same process, but we're not writing it down. So let me find. This will take us about 10 or 15 minutes, and then there'll be time for you guys to check in and ask questions. So once again, get in a comfy posture. Lying down's fine. And then drop into your breath again. And by that I mean noticing, becoming aware of your breathing. And maybe tuning in again to the qualities of spaciousness, centeredness, and warmth. And to kind of prime ourselves for self-kindness, I invite you to bring a compassionate image to mind. So this is something or somebody who for you represents compassion, kindness. It could be a relative. It could be a public figure you don't know, but you think of as being very compassionate. Some people that think it's something in nature for them, like a tree or an animal. So bringing that person or thing, this compassionate image to mind. And just notice what it feels like to be in the presence of that compassion, or even be the recipient of that compassion. Just let yourself bathe in that for a moment. And if you start, it's possible you can start to feel kind of emotional or moved by this, and that's totally normal and fine. Think of a dial in front of you, and if it's emotionally too strong, then just turn the dial back down a couple of notches, kind of disconnect a little bit. But it's okay, it's normal to feel a little moved by this. Or not, either doesn't really, it's fine. So now bringing to mind something in your own life that is creating some mild suffering for you. So if it was on a scale of 1 to 10, choose something that's a 5 or less, right? So nothing that's too activating, you know, a kind of irritation, niggling thing. We're going to practice on the small stuff, and then we can start to use our skills on the big stuff. So when you've chosen that thing that's bugging you, making you suffer a little bit, take a few moments to notice how you feel when you think about this. Notice any habitual thoughts you might have, self-criticism or stories that arise. Now take a moment and focus on the underlying desire or need that this suffering is revealing to you. What are you needing in this moment that's not being met, that's causing this suffering? See if you can find a part of yourself that wishes yourself happiness, health, ease, and success, etc., just like you might to a friend who is having this suffering. I'm going to invite you to try on these 3 phrases, and the idea is that they help you to kind of prime yourself to be a friend to yourself. You can use different phrases, and even if you don't feel the phrases, it's okay, it's still like priming you. So the phrases are, may I be happy? May I be healthy? And may I know peace? So consider the possibility, when you think about your suffering, that this actually doesn't separate you from others. but it in fact connects you. Everybody in this session right now knows what it feels like to be irritated, angry, suffering, or self-critical. Just like you, countless other people may be suffering in a similar way from exactly the same thing that you're suffering from. You might bring to mind people the world over who might be experiencing something similar. Or just bring to mind the fact that everybody here right now has got some kind of suffering that we're working with, just like you. So consider these phrases, saying them for all of us. May we be happy. May we be healthy. May we know peace. And may we be free from this suffering. And just honoring if anything arises, anything else you wish to say to yourself or remind yourself of as an act of encouragement and self-compassion. Even if it feels weird or unusual or kind of forced, we're like starting to tentatively blaze a trail towards self-compassion. Sometimes it feels pretty daunting. Every time you tread it, even with just this intention to be kind to yourself, you're making that trail just a little bit more treadable for the next time. And for those of you out there who are finding it really difficult to offer yourself compassion, or finding it difficult to receive your own offers of self-compassion, perhaps you might want to silently offer yourself these words. May that which resists compassion in me begin to soften. May that which resists compassion in me find peace. Then bring your awareness to your breath. Notice how it feels to breathe in and out. Feel your feet on the earth and your seat in the chair or on the ground, whatever you're lying on. Take a moment to acknowledge yourself and your intention to bring compassion for yourself. And then reorienting to the space. If this was a face-to-face group, this would be the time I would say, maybe make eye contact with people around you. But you can see the names or the photos on the screens and recognize that we're all in this boat together. And just acknowledging again that what you've done here is an act of self-compassion, and it's also something that will help you the way you show up in the world for others. So it's don't listen to those cultural voices that we've inhaled from birth. It's actually a very powerful kind of liberating act, but it's hard because it's so not habituated to it in many cases. Okay, so I think I will stop my presentation there. I'm really happy to take questions or comments, but I also don't want to intrude on your time, Anna. So I could be here to the end, whatever works for you. And I will send the self-compassion. Maybe we'll do the self-compassion letter next time. Actually, that would be a kind of cool thing to do.
Yeah, no, well, thank you so much, Jane. We'll definitely make sure we get those video resources as well, and then just some different links up on both the webpage, and I can also send them out via email. So yeah, now we just have some time here. If you have any questions, any reflections you'd like to share, you can send them in the chat, raise your hand, speak out. Keep an eye on that chat here. And otherwise, that's the end of our workshop today. So everyone gets a little extra 15 minutes here to maybe give yourself a little more self-compassion time, or have a calm transition into whatever else is in the rest of your day. One question I had, I'm curious, how would you recommend, as we're learning these things, we bring self-compassion practices to our loved ones? Do you have any recommendations for kind of helping bring others into this practice?
Oh, you mean how to get them to be more self-compassionate?
Yes.
Yeah, it's difficult. I think that I like looking at the resources, the video am I on? Yeah, the video resources by people like Neff, because they're short and compelling and like, oh yeah, she really makes some sense. So that's, I don't know if they're kind of amenable to that, but just sometimes we're so non-self-compassionate we can't even hear it, especially for my loved ones. And sometimes having an expert's voice can be helpful.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you can model compassion towards them. I'm just sending out, by the way, I'm putting somebody asked for the letter right now. So I'm going to put the letter in the chat. And then
it doesn't look like we're getting too many other questions, but I hope you're seeing the kudos.
Oh, I'm grateful to everyone for being here.
And again, we'll make sure that we get this letter out to you guys via email, and then also on our group webpage if you don't feel like trying to copy it over right now.
It's a great question. I don't know if I answered it, but you kind of can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink, right? So you can only put the stuff out there, and people have to be ready to take that on board.
Absolutely. Well, like I said earlier, the videos I think are really great. So thank you so much for sharing with us today. And we're excited to have you back in a month. And for everyone who's still on, thanks for joining with us today. And I hope you guys have a great, rest of your day. Have a good weekend. And we'll see you around.